architect at Eagle Technologies, and as the title suggests, today we're going to talk about Datrium. So what do you say we get right into it? All right, so here's our obligatory office space reference. Today, speaking alongside with me is Craig Nunez. Craig, do you want to say hi and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey, everyone. Craig Nunez here. I run product marketing and the marketing team for Datrium. Super happy to be here with you guys this morning.
All right, thanks, Craig. Craig's going to be doing most of the talking today. So in terms of the agenda, you're going to hear me blather on for about 5 minutes. I'll spend a brief moment talking about Eagle. And then what I think is more interesting, I'm going to talk about our engagement with Datrium and how we've decided that they're the product that we tend to lead with, especially in the hyper-converged market. And then I'll hand it over to Craig, and he'll do all the real heavy lifting, and then we'll come back to Q&A. If you've got questions as we're moving through this, go ahead and ask them. And if it seems like a good opportunity to interrupt Craig, I will. Otherwise, we'll save them up for the end. Does that sound good, Craig?
That sounds awesome.
All right. So who is Eagle Technologies? Well, I'm going to make this quick. We're a data center integrator. We've been around the Midwest for over 35 years, and we're really focused. I oftentimes call it data and information management. But what we focus on in the data center is where you store your data, how you give it appropriate levels of performance, how you store it with appropriate levels of spend, how you do good business continuity, disaster recovery. More and more, we help folks decide maybe where the data should live. Is it a good opportunity for software as a service? Is this a good opportunity for co-location, right? All these as a service models that have been hot topics lately. So one of my jobs at Eagle Technologies is also looking at new technology and trying to decide when a new technology is mature and it's ready to really take over some older, antiquated way of approaching a problem in the data center. So how does Datrium fit into that? Well, I can still remember 4 years ago when I first heard Datrium, the name came up. And at the time, it was a stealthy startup company. Nobody would tell me what they did. All I knew is that they were trying to do something different, right? And that they were just chocked full of talent. So quite literally, the founders of Datrium, these guys created virtualization. They created deduplication. You can see here on the list, their engineering team has over 200 patents. It's a lot of fun talking to these guys. They're really impressive to talk to. But in a nutshell, it was about a year after that, about 3 years ago, that someone finally told me what they were setting out to accomplish, which is what we're going to talk about today. And I still remember getting pretty excited about it. So flash forward into reality. About 5 years ago, Eagle represented our first hyper-converged infrastructure product, what we now call traditional hyper-convergence. And what we noticed is that there were a lot of pros to HCI, right? The building block architecture, the promise of lower TCO, that distributed performance model. But what we quickly figured out is that while everyone was out there holding pom-poms, there didn't seem to be anybody out there balancing the force. And what I mean is there weren't folks out there talking about all the challenges that were introduced with this model. It got to the point where me and the other Eagle engineers actually created a presentation. It's an hour-long presentation that we give around the Midwest. We still give it to this day. This is one slide that I plucked out of it. But we can literally talk for 45 minutes about some of the challenges that are introduced with traditional hyper-converged infrastructure. And towards the end of this, after Craig talks, I'll touch on a couple of these just to show what I'm talking about. But the real takeaway here, where I'm going with this is we've been testing Datrium. We have their box in our lab. We've been testing them for over a year. I'm really excited about the product. But about 6 or 7 months ago, I opened this presentation up again to actually make sure it was updated so I could deliver it at a trade show. And what I was shocked to realize is that Datrium literally mitigated or completely wiped out all of these challenges. I couldn't have made up a better story. It was one of those great moments in a nerd's life where you realize that something transformative has happened. So, Craig, I hope I haven't built you up too much because I'm about to hand over the baton. But at the end of the day, Craig's going to talk about something that's really transformative. I'm going to try to wrap a bow around it at the end, and then hopefully we can generate some interest so you guys want to test this product in your own data center. Sound good, sir?
That sounds awesome.
All right. Let me hand over control. You should be able to take over.
All right. Okay, well, let's see if I can do that. There we go. All right. Okay, so yeah, let's jump in.
Oh, we got to switch screens here, sir.
Here
Is
we
that
go.
working for you?
I think so. There
Okay.
we go. Yes, now we're good. So there we go. So who's Datrium? I would tell you guys on the phone this morning. Don't ask me. Ask one of our hundreds of customers out there who've already kind of taken this path. We have literally hundreds of customers across finance, hosting, healthcare, state and local government, education, and what are they doing with Datrium? Deployments revolve around a couple of things. One is large server VM consolidation. So they are bringing together a whole host of mixed workloads that you'd find in any data center out there. SQL, a little data warehousing, maybe VDI and Exchange, all running on a single system. That mixed workload consolidation is a sweet spot for what we do here. And the other thing that folks really have come to rely on us for is just kind of straight up performance intensive, mission critical deployments that they are hooked on the notion that shifting off of traditional arrays to kind of a scale out architecture, VM-Centric, but something that really delivers sort of the tier one capability that they need in the heart of the data center, more or less where hyper-converged infrastructure has fallen a bit short, as Brian was talking about. So what do we do? Our aim is to just simply make the hard, tedious work of maintaining infrastructure just go away, so you guys can focus on what's important, which is driving your key business objectives for a given month, quarter, or year. What we do is we bring together in a single system your virtual hosts, ESX, Red Hat KVM, etc. We bring that together with primary storage, think flash right on your hosts, secondary storage, so we can handle not just your primary data, but anything associated with your backups cost effectively, and even archive to cloud. We converge that into a single system that any one individual can manage. Storage engineer, virtualization engineer, system engineer, it doesn't matter. It is that simple. So we take the work out of infrastructure. That is what we call Datrium DVX. Now, for those of you who today are simply running traditional arrays and your favorite server, you might be wondering, well, why take that next step? And if you haven't looked hard at it already, the industry is going there, and it's going there fast. Between converged infrastructure and hyper-convergence and even more modern forms of converged infrastructure, by next year, that market will have more than doubled since just a couple of years ago. Very high growth segment, and traditional array-based infrastructure is coming down. And why? Because when you bring a converged infrastructure to bear, you're going to take work out of it, right? The vendors in the past relied on you to be the integrators, to put it all together and make it work. And I think what has gone on over the last few years is customers have figured out, look, no, that is your job as our IT vendor to make that happen. And that's really driving the growth of converged infrastructure. The other thing going on is, just because business is moving faster, you are being tasked with more roles. I bet you there's not a person out there that if you look back 3, 4, 5 years ago, that there weren't a few people doing what you're tasked to do today. you're wearing lots of different hats and handling, more and more a part of the infrastructure workflows that, previously were done by different teams. So that we call that role convergence. And really for that to work, the infrastructure has got to cooperate. It's got to be a lot easier for you. And that's that's really where we come into play here. So what do we deliver you with our partners at Eagle? We deliver a product called the DVX, and the DVX is a converged system, a simple turnkey platform that is complete with what we call compute nodes and data nodes, and I'll get into that in a second. End-to-end support, really aimed at your virtualization or even a hybrid cloud project. So we allow you to mix and match your own servers. You don't have to use Datrium compute nodes at all. Totally your choice. If you've got Blade servers in your infrastructure, we can take advantage of that and bring that into a modern converged system. We let you mix and match hypervisors. So you might have a fair bit of VMware ESX, but a lot of our customers have a growing Red Hat KVM environment. That can all coexist within a single system. Now, a Datrium compute node, it's kind of like having an all-flash array inside of your virtualization server. Our software on the compute node leverages idle CPU for all data services, including erasure coding. So think of that as double failure protection. Data reduction, so inline dedupe and compression. Encryption, and all the data management functions associated with snapshots and replications and the like. Each compute node is going to have a couple of local flash drives, SSD or NVMe. And we'll use that as a cache that will hold all of your VM data. So when a VM goes to read data, it never leaves the server. It's super fast. You don't have to wait for that network latency, ESX queue depth issues, etc. Super fast. We've had people consolidate and virtualize data warehouses, and performance on Datrium has been faster than bare metal. Flash next to the VM, super important. We also compress and dedupe all that data, all your data, before it lands on flash. So, a couple of terabyte drives in your server looks like 6 or 8 terabytes of effective capacity. So, you do the math, it's a couple $100 or less per terabyte of flash. Hey, somebody out there was having trouble with sound. Is it, am I coming through okay? Maybe I stop a second and check that.
Craig, I can hear you just fine. I do have a question though.
Yeah, fire away.
Yeah, one of the questions came in, and maybe I'll even set it up more because I kind of know where the customer's coming from. Lots of times people use dedupe as a checkbox. So almost every vendor says they do dedupe now, but when you peel back the covers, it's per volume. They'll put words like adaptive in front of it because it only does cold data. Can you talk a little bit about your dedupe implementation and whether or not it's global?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the founders here at Datrium fundamentally invented the concept of deduplication on disk, and the architecture has deduplication and compression, built in from the ground floor. So dedupe is one of those things. If you add it later, it's going to it's not something you really want to bolt on the system. It starts not with the dedupe function itself, but simply how you treat the data under the covers. And so it fundamentally starts with the architecture. So what our engineers and founders have done in architecting this in right in the foundation of the system, deduplication is always on. Compression is always on. all the performance stuff that I'm going to talk about here is run with all of the data services turned on. And what that means is you never have to, kind of look at a given, set of VMs or whatever and decide, gosh, can I afford the performance to get great efficiency? You get both with this system because it's been engineered from the start. It is, the checkbox thing, Brian, that you mentioned, it is a challenge and becomes a config nightmare because it's not just turning it on or off. It's knowing what happens when you turn on something that's going to negatively affect performance across your system. Super important, and it's something we're super proud of. Okay.
Perfect. Thanks, Craig.
Sure. Now, the other cool thing about this system, and where it's a little different from a hyper-converged node, is we have taken the durable capacity that normally would live inside of a hyper-converged node and pulled that out into a shared data node on the network. And why have we done that? Well, storage inside of a server effectively turns what used to be a stateless server, easily maintained, to a stateful storage node. And so in the world of hyperconvergence, if you lose more than one drive, more than one node, you're going to lose your whole cluster. But in this model, you can lose any number of servers. All but one server can go down, and you still have availability to your data. And
hey,
so,
Craig, can I break in there?
Absolutely.
The nerd in me just wants to add that was always one of our biggest issues with traditional hyperconvergence.
Mm-hmm.
Is, if you look at vSAN, for instance, the concessions you have to make just to do simple maintenance on your hypervisor, the messages that they give you where you have to decide whether or not you want to lower your redundancy or what consequences you have.
Yeah.
Customers that jumped in with vSAN, a lot of those messages were really scary, and it caused them to start moving away from, for instance, from actually doing maintenance midday, which was one of the greatest benefits of virtualization when it came out. So we talked to a lot of customers that quite literally the easiest way to get an interest in Datrium is just to mention that you guys are distributed, but you have stateless nodes, meaning that you can drop as many nodes as you want in a Datrium environment, and your storage is never at risk. In fact, it's always at N+2, or what people call RAID 6 erasure coding. So that's definitely worth mentioning.
Absolutely.
The other thing I want to mention real quick is that we do seem to have a couple of people that have called in that are having audio, but I don't think anyone that's using computer audio is having issues. So if you're having issue with one or the other, you might try calling in or joining the computer audio and see if it gets any better. Apologies for that.
Yep. Yeah, great. Thanks for that, Brian, for sure. And we've seen, not to pick on, any one technology, but we've seen folks who've, fired up vSAN and their server maintenance windows balloon to many times what they used to be, and they're suddenly spending, their whole Saturday just dealing with server patches. And so, it is a big deal, the whole resilience capability of this new convergence model. So a data node, just to kind of get back to that, it's this fully redundant data appliance. It's got mirrored NVRAM, so your writes are very fast to the data nodes. And data nodes then they store your authoritative copy of data. They are also chock full of low cost, high capacity 7K RPM drives that are combined with always on erasure coding, compression, global dedupe, like I mentioned earlier. So you've got this ultra low cost repository for not just hot data, but cold data as well. So think of those data nodes as built-in secondary storage capable of cost effectively storing all of your backup data. Okay. So hopefully you're starting to get a feel for just the scope of what this system can possibly do for you.
Yeah. And
now,
Craig, sorry I keep interrupting you, but we got another question, and I think it's a
Yeah,
really good
good.
time to bring this up. The question
Great.
was, what kind of parity do you use? So we already mentioned that these guys use erasure coding down at that secondary storage of that data node. But I think an important point to mention is that on the hosts themselves, that is fundamentally just cache. So not only do we get the benefits of data reduction, right, Craig, but there is no parity overhead. We don't have to
Right,
ingest at RAID 10. We don't have to parity those drives at all. So you
right.
really do maximize your investment in what is now commoditized flash.
Absolutely. Yeah, and if you were to lose that server, guess what? You're going to just serve up those VMs on a neighboring server. All of your data is protected and preserved in those data nodes and ready to go with any changes that might go on the host side, node side, for sure. Now, you might expect what I'm going to say here, which is, look, everything is, associated with this platform is VM-centric. You're not going to find storage artifacts to manage. Again, I love that about where hyper-converged came from. But where we go from there is we have built into this platform a huge kind of analytics capabilities. There are literally 6,000 different metrics that provide you real-time data on your environment when and if you need it. So you see a little pop-up there on the right side of your screen. That's just top metrics that you can choose in a drop-down menu. What are my hottest VMs? Where are my hottest SSDs? You can kind of get down to reads and writes and latencies across the system. So if you've got a problem, a user says, hey, something's not looking right, you can very quickly get right to what's going on, and any kind of troubleshooting you might need to do is going to get done super fast, right? Beyond the VM-centric capability,
Hey, Craig?
Yeah, Brian.
Yeah, my new title is The Interrupter. Can you go back to that last slide?
Yes.
I had a question come in about scale-up potential over there to the right. So, Craig, you can explain it or I can. It's up to you, sir.
You take a crack at it, and I'm going to go deep on it in the very next slide.
Okay, so yeah, so at the end of the day, one of the nicest things I like about the interface is it tells you how many nodes you can add, how many compute nodes you can add at your existing workload. So for instance, I've seen Datrium clusters that are rolling out 250,000 IOPS that tell you that you can add 30 more compute nodes before you risk overrunning the throughput capabilities of your network. It would take a deep dive to kind of get into this log structure file system that they use that's really cool. And that's something that we are doing on an upcoming Lunch and Learn. But I'll let you take that deeper now, Craig.
Yeah, and if you're interested too, we've got a number of really interesting blogs on exactly that, how the capabilities of a log structure file system can really really change the game for you. The system itself, I mentioned that this is all about handling workloads at scale in the heart of your data center. And the beauty is you get to start with just what you need. Start with a compute node or two, start with a data node. But architecturally, this has been built so that as you need more compute node, more I/O speed, you just add a server. If you need more capacity, you just add a data node. And you can literally scale this system to more than 100 compute nodes and 10 data nodes, which looks like about a petabyte of capacity for very, very high performance. And it's a single composable system, very easy to manage, very efficient because all resources are fundamentally able to be shared and provisioned from that one system. We call this architecture, this capability, split provisioning. It's a lot like if you study, kind of the post 2010 hyperscalers and kind of what they've done in their data centers. We've effectively mirrored that for your data center, where VM processing and IO processing scale on compute, and then that durable capacity scales independently on the network separately. So it kind of mirrors sort of a, EC2 S3 kind of architecture, and brings a lot of those benefits, which is massive scale, great efficiency, et cetera, to your data center. So the bottom line is you've got a system here that's going to scale many times larger than hyper-converged. We find many folks who started down the hyper-converged path and now have 10 or 15 clusters of the stuff, and it's driving them mad. That is never going to be the case with the DVX here.
Craig,
yeah.
forgive me if I'm stealing your thunder, but
no.
one of the things I like about your model is that it doesn't matter how many data nodes you have or how many compute nodes you have.
Yeah.
The presentation layer is just one large NFS namespace.
Mm-hmm.
So gone are the days of managing 20, 30, 60 VMFS volumes.
Right.
And once again, this is kind of an off the rails comment that we could get into more detail later, but it really changes DR as well. Being able to bring anything from an individual VMFX file up to a container or folder of 100 VMs instantaneously inside that same namespace without rescanning VMFS or worrying about all paths down issues when you tear stuff down. It really changes the game, and it's very cool.
Yeah, and just to be super clear, what we present to ESX, we look like NFS, but NFS terminates within the host, and what you see on your UI is just VMs, vDisks, that sort of thing. So super easy from an administration perspective, despite the great scale and low latency you get. Now, one of the things we did recently, there's no better way to kind of demonstrate the capability of a system than stand up in public on a benchmark that others in the industry have done, just to kind of say, look, guys, here's what this technology is capable of. And we had a fantastic IO mark result, and you can go find this on the IO mark page, the whole gory details behind the report. But we benchmarked a single Datrium system with 50, it had 50 compute nodes. In this case, we partnered up with Dell and 50 Dell servers, 10 compute nodes, and we benchmarked 8,000 IO mark VMs. And that number alone might not mean much to you other than being a big number, but it was 10 times faster than the biggest hyper-converged configuration, which was pimped out with all the latest Skylake servers and Optane flash and the whole 9 yards. And we were using basically last generation servers with last generation SSDs. It even blew away the fastest result in IO mark history, which was an all-flash array from our pals over at IBM. So, and it did that with lower latency versus all of that. So, fantastic scale and performance. But the real point of this was we did it with all of the data services on. While this was going on, you got inline compression and deduplication. You got double failure protection with erasure coding. We even had encryption turned on and delivered these amazing results. And I think at the end of the day, that was really the point. I think what we are trying to do here, I mentioned it at the top, we're trying to take the work out of the underlying infrastructure that is that tedious configuration work, right? And so in this system, when you scale, you need more speed, add a compute node. You need more capacity, add a data node. Everything else is just on. You'll find, if you've studied hyperconvergence or been a user of it, you are going to have to, for every cluster, for every workload, you're going to have to make choices about hot and cold tiers and what kind of data protection, replicas versus erasure coding. Can I afford the overhead of erasure coding? Can I, turning on encryption, what's that going to do to my service levels? Dedupe and compression, are they even options for me? Did I buy the right kind of hardware to support encryption? It's endless, the number of things you're going to have to work through just to configure your next workload. and that stuff is just gone with the Datrium system. And that at the end of the day is the big objective.
Yeah. Craig, if I can add, I was talking about that IOMERC test recently, and I mentioned that you guys peaked out at about 18 million IOPS, and the customer had a pretty good response. He said, "But I don't need 18 million IOPS, right? That's showing off." And I thought about it for a second, and my answer was, well, really the difference between that 18 million IOP display and what I would, pitch for you is really just the amount of compute nodes that we want to put in your environment.
Yeah,
you can. Go ahead,
Brian,
sir.
it's latency too. I mean, because you're right. There are few people who are going to consume that many IOPS, but virtually every application is going to benefit from the latency that kind of system delivers. I mean, we have folks who have deployed this system, and they're about halfway through, the deployment through their users, and one set of users is going to say, "Hey, I don't know what you guys are doing, but something is different. It's awesome now. It's snappy. Like, I don't wait for things anymore." And the other set of users that aren't on it yet are like, "Hey, wait a minute. I still have the same old stuff. Like, I want that new stuff too." Users are going to see this, and it's all about that latency. The IOPS, like you say, Brian, it's a little braggy, but the latency is real business impact, real business benefit, for sure.
Yeah, Craig, I was working with a customer recently, and we decided to do a POC on some 6-year-old compute nodes, right? And I had to break it to them that they were only going to get maybe 40 or 50,000 IOPS per server, and I had to check myself and realize that, like, I'm a little too comfortable with Datrium because that's still kind of an outlandish claim, right? But brand new Datrium compute nodes, they're about 100,000 IOPS per, so you don't think about IOPS anymore, to Craig's point, and we give you consistent sub-millisecond latencies to boot, which is what really matters.
And we're gonna be able to take older gear and make it feel new again. So it's awesome. Hey, I've talked a lot about the built-in backup capabilities, and so let me get into that a little more. It's for a lot of folks, backup is kind of a separate workflow, separate infrastructure. There's a fair bit of cost and complexity involved, and again, we aim to just build that right in, and we've got a very rich backup class catalog built into the system that can support up to about 1.2 million snapshots, 2,000 snaps per VM. So you just don't have to worry about max limits anymore. We will snap down to the VM level, even the vDisk level. If you happen to be starting to play around with containers, we'll snap container persistent volumes. So it's a very robust and powerful capability. You can snap locally, replicate remotely, and your DR strategy is intact. We've also got a very robust data encryption capability built in that stretches from your compute node, from your server, data in memory, in cache, in flight, across the network, and at rest, all encrypted in a very robust way. And when you replicate it offsite, it stays encrypted end to end. So super powerful capability here. I will add, by the way, we're super proud of what we're doing here, but if there are things you're looking to do from a data management perspective, and you want to bring in a partner who can kind of extend your backup and replication capability, we've got a rich set of partners here, and what we're all about doing is meeting your needs. If you can get it done with this stuff here, awesome. If in turn you need to bring in your favorite backup partner, we do that as well. Super good. Okay, now we do have some breaking news for you guys on the phone. A treat for you guys who took the time to tune in today, because we have just unveiled a new kind of DVX. We call it Cloud DVX. And what we have effectively done is created a cloud native version of DVX to provide you backup and recovery services for your on-prem DVX. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what's going on here. So at the end of the day, the whole workflow for backup, on-site and off-site, it's traditionally been hard, right? You've got a whole lot of components you guys have to bring together. Backup servers, proxy servers, the software itself, secondary storage for disk-based backup. Then there's tape for long-term retention and off-site backup. It's a complicated and not low-cost environment. So in addition to focus on simplifying local backup and recovery, we believe by leveraging the public cloud, there's actually an opportunity to simplify your offsite backup and long-term retention needs by using public cloud as a tape replacement. So instead of kind of the traditional disk to tape you might be engaged in today, flash to disk to cloud or flash to cloud might just well be a simpler and more cost-effective alternative. What the cloud's going to give you versus sort of that tape strategy is, it's going to provide you a nice pay-as-you-go approach, no media management, easy data access. And I've got a story for you later on here about one customer's experience kind of taking this journey. Now, let me tell you, the public cloud has, its share of things you've got to think about before getting into it. And one of the things we, took a good hard look at before we went down this path is where a lot of the challenges are. And we're focused here on AWS. AWS, it's infrastructure. It's a whole different infrastructure than what you're used to. And when you get into it, a lot of folks we deal with, they've got one infrastructure already. Learning a second one doesn't sound that appealing. And especially if you're using that second infrastructure for backup and recovery, you've got to set up your replication environment. You've got to deal with all the AWS, service failures. EC2 goes away, you've got to get another instance back. You've got to deal with software upgrades. It doesn't give you the same level of proactive support that you're used to in your own infrastructure. And if you're using it as a backup target, you've probably got a separate backup silo. So you've got a lot of work going on there if you're going to take on public cloud backup. For that reason alone, it just hasn't taken off as much as folks had anticipated. Marry in the cost that the public cloud can require. You're going to pay for whatever capacity you store there. Every time you touch that capacity, every put and get in the cloud, you're going to pay. VPN on ingress, you're gonna pay hourly and data rates. You're going to pay for egress. If whatever you're doing in the public cloud has poor data reduction, it's going to be a costly proposition for sure. And then you've got to look at the restore side, right? Why have an offsite backup if you can't recover from it? And generally S3 based recovery is slow. Why? You first are going to have to copy back what you need to a backup device, rehydrate it, play incrementals, copy that over to primary, and go from there. And by the way, a lot of the backup products that will provide you an S3 backup don't have something called forever incrementals, which means every week or so you're going to have to push a full to the public cloud. It's going to take you a heck of a long time, and it's going to, again, be a huge cost driver. So these are the reasons people haven't done much today with the cloud for backup, but we had an idea on how to change that. So we again are taking advantage of that split provisioning approach. We've got this cloud native DVX instance in AWS that our architecture on premise mirrors what a lot of the public cloud folks are doing. So creating that cloud native instance was super easy. We didn't touch a lick of file system code to do this. The Cloud DVX provides you this backup and recovery service from AWS, and it's going to have a wonderful data reduction footprint that is going to mean maybe for the first time you've got an option for offsite backup or disk to cloud. Okay, so how did we get there? Well, what we effectively do, you will have your on-prem DVX. You will choose to back up offsite. Fundamentally, all you need is AWS credentials and one click, and we will set up that instance in the cloud for you. From then on, it's basically delivered as a service. If there's a problem with EC2, under the covers, we're going to handle that for you. We've got full control of the serverless management called Lambda that is going to re-provision resources for you. We do that all for you. Upgrades of the software itself, we're going to handle that. And we're going to give you the kind of proactive support and alerts that you're used to in your own data center, not just with our Cloud DVX, but the underlying resources as well. And our support team is going to be involved if there's any hiccup that goes on up there. So we're going to basically extend your DVX infrastructure in the cloud. You will not need to learn AWS. Like I say, you just need credentials and to pay your monthly bill. And we're going to talk a bit about that monthly bill in a second. Okay, so we're going to make it easy is the bottom line. The next bit is the economics. A big part of how you've got to keep your costs down in the public cloud revolves around that dedupe and compression capability we talked about early on in the presentation. And we take it one step further when we go to the cloud. Our Cloud DVX is going to globally deduplicate across all DVXs and sites that are replicating into it. So you're going to get another level of deduplication. And on average, our customers today are seeing a 3-to-1 level of dedupe within a DVX. Take that one step further in the cloud, because we'll dedupe across those systems, and you're going to see between 4 and 5-to-1 data reduction. That is money when we're talking about replicating to the cloud. Hyper-converged approaches, because the dedupe is a little more what Brian called earlier, sort of those checkbox options, not going to deliver you quite the same level of benefit. We've been very generous in the estimates here in this slide. The AWS charges are going to run you roughly 3x what we're able to do here. And again, with that built-in end-to-end encryption, you won't need to pay for VPN charges either. So that's just built right into your Datrium system. And if you are taking a look at separate HCI backup approaches on S3, because of the need to periodically put fulls back up into the cloud, no capability for forever incrementals. The cost model is just wrong. It's not going to work for you. I can tell you that. Okay, so a real affordable approach, perhaps for the first time, for an offsite backup target. Whoop. I am somehow not driving anymore. Here we go. Okay. Now, why back up to the cloud if you can't recover from it, right? And so we've taken a good hard look at recovery time. And the deal here is because we are only going to retrieve what data is missing on site. If you need to restore a VM, that Cloud DVX knows about everything you've got in every DVX mirroring into it. So we are only going to retrieve or push that bit of data that is missing from your system and reconstruct that VM locally. So it's going to be a fraction of the capacity of what you're restoring.
Hey, Craig, quick
yeah.
question, sir.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, customers asking, what if I have a complete site failure and I bring up a brand new Datrium cluster? Can I pull that data back down?
You could do. I would set that up this way. So for a complete site protection, I would propose you have active Datrium DVX systems that are backing up each other. So because the amount of data you might have on a given site, if it's 100 terabytes, the time it's going to take to restore that over the wire is going to be a very long time. Versus recovering terabytes of data or a bunch of VMs, that is an interesting use case. So that's why I say if you do have a couple of sites, you'll set up your full site DR that way, but then you'll have kind of your think of cloud. Think of the cloud as kind of your Iron Mountain replacement or your tape replacement. You won't need to think through that going forward. Okay.
Perfect. Yeah, I've got a university right now that has 2 data centers just a couple miles apart, and they love the 40 gigs of throughput. But to your point, they're thinking of AWS as insurance, right? Yeah,
exactly. And I've got a financial customer here I'm going to talk about in a second who has kind of gone down this path. Interesting use case. But the bottom line with Restore here is it's going to be very fast given the differential and dedupe aware approach we take. It's going to be fast because of the very small footprint we have up in the cloud. And we're going to restore direct to your host. We're not going to restore first to a backup platform, rehydrate it on and on. So you're going to see awesome recovery levels in that way. Now, so the 2 use cases that folks are most taking on here, I talked about, that tape replacement approach, kind of disk to cloud, using cloud as that, insurance, Brian, as you mentioned, or for simple offsite backup, you only have one data center. You don't want to buy more gear and a colo for your offsite backup. It's it's a very affordable alternative to a second DVX, right? Now, we had a couple of customers take advantage here. Whoop, here we go. University of Maryland was that use case where they were looking for just offsite backup. The university was going through, kind of a mandate to handle this. They had a relationship with AWS, but my customer there, Jeff, at University of Maryland, one of their departments there, knew nothing about AWS. He didn't have credentials or anything like that. So, and to his relief, he didn't have to become a student of AWS. He simply got his credentials, and one click, it was set up, and he was very easily able to replicate snaps to AWS, just like he'd create local snaps or snaps to a remote data center, that easy. And Jeff had an interesting story for us because I'd asked him a bit about the restore, how's that working for you? Because the University of Maryland, their pipes aren't as big, Brian, as the customer you were talking about. And he said he had an interesting experience, and that we had told him when you restore a VM, once you click restore, go to the performance screen and watch your IOs, and when the rate drops, you're done. So he did that, clicked restore, went to the performance screen. The performance screen showed zeros. He was waiting for it to kick in, and he sat there for a few minutes and wondering, gosh, what's taking so long in the cloud? Must be preparing something or whatever. After 10 minutes, he thought, I better go check and see. Maybe something's going on. He looked, and his VM had restored. It had restored in the time it took him to go from the restore screen to the performance screen. Why? Because, in his system, he had, fingerprints of that data all over the place, and he only needed to restore a few bytes of data. It was that, and so it was that fast. Literally, he was blown away. Loved it. Intuition is a different use case. This is, Brian, a little more like a customer you were talking about with 2 data centers. They had tape at Iron Mountain. They have 4 businesses in the financial services industry that they are supporting here. And sadly, they're Florida-based and were impacted by Hurricane Irma. They had a Clearwater data center, and you recall the hurricane kind of drove right into Clearwater. Their story is a tough one because they called up Iron Mountain to get a few tapes back, and Iron Mountain was a little busy at the time, especially in the Clearwater area, and they were kept waiting for several days, just waiting to get a truck with their tapes out. And the service level there is kind of best effort. And when the delivery trucks saw a bit of water in the roadways, well, they turned around. They went home. So Intuition was left without their tapes for a material length of time. And the customer said, look, if I had my long-term data in the cloud, even with small pipes, I would have had that data back many times faster than otherwise. So they are committed to shifting, from a tape centric strategy for long-term retention to public cloud, given the economics they've seen with their platform. So that's kind of food for thought for you guys. It's something new and exciting, and we've got a whole bunch of other stuff coming here with Eagle as we go into 18. So I encourage you guys to kind of keep an eye on it. With that, I'll turn it back over to Brian.
Awesome. Thanks, Craig. Let me go ahead and hit next here.
Yeah.
All right. So we do have some questions coming in at this point. I'll just save them for the next slide, our Q&A session. But to get back to that challenges slide that I had earlier, we actually have a presentation coming up where we drag you guys through the weeds on this. But just to kind of fly over this and cover a couple of these. These guys avoid vendor lock-in by commoditizing as much of the stack as they can. You get to use commodity flash, right? It can be SATA SSD. It can be NVMe. It can be Crosspoint. It can be whatever's coming out in a year or two. Doesn't have to exist in a separate cluster, right? It might just be your 2 SQL servers, but they commoditize and white box all of that, so they can really drive costs down. If you look at Gartner, they've always said the promise of lower TCO when they talk about hyper-convergence, and that's one of those things that you typically see with HCI. These guys avoid that. In terms of integration, you can grow your capacity and your performance separately with these guys. So we can add some flash if we need to. We can add a new host, and like I said earlier, get 100,000 IOPS. We always get low latency, but we just have a lot of flexibility in terms of how we grow this solution. You're not going to find yourself like you will with traditional HCI, where you're adding a 5th host that has twice as much storage as the previous host, and now you've got some funny N+1 availability things to consider during updates. We can get into it in more detail later, but these guys don't have any east-west traffic concerns. It's all north-south, so it's very easy to troubleshoot, not as burdensome on your network. These guys handle secondary workloads or large file services, quite frankly, better than any HCI solution that I've ever tested or had explained to me. We're going to get into more detail into that on our upcoming webinar I'll mention here in a second. Some of the other biggies, operational issues. This is a conversation we're going to cover in that next roadshow. But it's the notion of making concessions with HCI, right? RF2, RF3, FTT1, FTT2. How many failures can I tolerate? And then also managing storage failures to tolerate separate from compute failures to tolerate. It can literally twist your brain sometimes, especially during updates. These guys have built an architecture that just eradicates all of those issues. Another issue that comes up consistently is everybody's looking to find encryption solutions nowadays. And when you see encryption solutions, not just in HCI, but in shared storage, there always seems to be some sort of consensus to be made. Maybe you do it at the VMware level or the software level, and you destroy the ability to get good data reduction. Mm-hmm. Maybe you have to buy an external KMS for $50,000 and have it redundant across multiple sites, right? Maybe when the data hits the network, it's unencrypted because you're using self-encrypting disks. These guys, hands down, have the best encryption that I've ever seen, and you literally don't think about it. You turn it on, it manages the keys, the magic happens in flight, at rest. The data is literally encrypted in memory before it even traverses the network. And then finally, once again, this is a 30-minute topic, but all of this new memory is coming out, I should say storage, that is approaching memory latencies. And a lot of this is coming out quick. The costs are being driven down fast. This is stuff that you may be able to take advantage of today, like NVMe and Crosspoint, or maybe in a year or two, you might have a problem that can only be solved by some of these latencies. With other solutions, you're building new clusters, you're adopting new technologies. With these guys, I want to have two hosts, right, that have this crazy laser crystal memory, whatever it is, and I'm going to get to take advantage of it day one on commoditized hardware. So they solve a lot of challenges that, quite frankly, nobody else can solve right now. They really do kind of stand on an island. In terms of questions, I've already got a couple worked up here, Craig. Feel free to interrupt me if there's anything you want to add.
No, that was awesome, and yeah, I'd love to hear some of the questions that popped up here.
Okay, well, we got 3 minutes, so I'll move fast. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So, Craig, you add to any of these when you want to. I'll try to answer them first.
Sure.
So one question is, what is the file system? Is it block or object storage? And really the answer is neither. As Craig kind of touched on earlier, when you install Datrium, in a VMware world, you push out a VMware installation bundle, and then quite literally this HBA presents NFS up to the hypervisor. It works very similar if you're looking at KVM as well. That's great because it's one massive namespace. It allows us to present the same way to multiple hypervisors, even multiple operating systems. But really the NFS terminates inside the compute node. It's just a presentation layer. What these guys do on the back is they have a lot of special sauce. They open up direct sockets down to those secondary storage nodes. They even get rid of encapsulation penalties and latencies there. So it's something that I'd love to get into more detail if we're ever face to face. Another question I had is, can you run KVM and VMware in the same environment? And Craig, you might have touched on this, but the answer is yes. You can run it in the same environment. You can have a DevOps or a test environment that's running KVM. You can just set it up to get comfortable with it. No problem at all.
Right.
What requirement, new question, what requirement exists for a server to work with Datrium? So the easiest way to explain it is if the server is supported by VMware, for instance, in a VMware environment, or by KVM, right? It's on an HCL, and you've got some flash you can put in it. You've got a Datrium ready node. Would you agree, Craig? Perfect.
Yeah. All we need is we'll load our software. You need a minimum of 800 gig of flash, which is nothing these days, and I think 8 cores, which again, even for older servers, most people have got that lying around. 8 cores total, not for us, total. So again, we can take on whatever server infrastructure you've got running ESX today and turn that into a real modern converged infrastructure system.
Awesome. Do we support VMware 6.5? The answer is yes.
Absolutely.
Do we support containers? The answer is yes. Also with stateful storage behind it. These guys have a really nice story around containers. If you've got an organization that's looking into that, be happy to come in and talk about that in more detail.
Yeah, and the data management aspects that we bring to a container environment is world class. So yeah, if you're thinking about it, take a look.
All right, and last question is, who is the primary support contact? Does Eagle manage the support, or is it Datrium, or in a case of working with cloud, would it be AWS directly? And I like how they put this: whose throat do we choke? So I'll take a run at answering this, and you can add, Craig.
Right.
So anyone that's worked with Eagle for a while knows that we have a lot of nerds in a basement somewhere that do tech support. And a lot of our customers like to call us first because maybe we also help them with the backup environment, right? Or maybe we do some managed backups. So if you are that customer that likes to call us first, keep doing it, right? We can be your first point of contact. I will tell you that even though we didn't get into it, there are a lot of capabilities these guys have with analytics and the amount of analytics that they collect. So beyond the folks that want to call Eagle, if you call anyone else, call Datrium. They should always be your first contact. If it's an issue you think you have with AWS, if it's an issue you think you have with your hypervisor, call Datrium. They have all this analytics at their disposal. They're going to help you. I've been fortunate enough to be on some of those calls, and I say fortunate because these guys are really great at what they do, and it's almost an unfair advantage because of the amount of analytics they have at their disposal.
Yeah.
Craig, would you add anything there?
Yeah, I'd say everything we do, we're going to do lockstep with Eagle. When we take a look at a problem, frankly, if you've got a problem, we don't care where the problem is at. It's a converged system. Could be in any part of the system. Could be, with the AWS stuff, could be with AWS services. We don't care. We're not going to get off the phone until we solve that for you. And, I think one of the things our customers love about what we do is they have never experienced support anywhere to the level that we deliver. So it's something that is awesome. And again, we'll do that, hand in glove with our pals here at Eagle.
Thanks, Craig. All right, last slide. We ran long. I said I wasn't going to. I'm a liar. In terms of next steps, one thing I always say to folks is I can remember the first time someone explained deduplication or virtualization to me, and I kind of had that say again moment. I've found that with some customers, we kind of have to go over Datrium a couple of times because it's kind of a paradigm shift. So we'd love to come back on site and maybe take another run at going over this. These guys have so many capabilities. It's oftentimes a lot to cover in an hour. One great way to do that without us coming on site is to attend this upcoming HCI Challenges Solved presentation that me and my other engineers worked on. We quite literally took that bulleted slide that I showed you, and we go point by point through traditional HCI challenges and what these guys do different. It's a little bit deeper in the weeds than what we did today. If you have any nerd bits floating through your body, though, you're really going to like it. Mm-hmm. You can see the cities there listed. If you want to make sure that you get invited, please just send Gail, our marketing director, an email. She should be floating in your inbox somewhere. Once again, we don't have time to get into it, but these guys have a really great sizing tool. It'll teach you a lot about your environment and let us show you where we think we're going to get some benefits and gains. And then finally, one of the things I like best about Datrium is they like to put their money where their mouth is. So if you're serious about looking at this product, we can bring in a Datrium node so you guys can test it. You can try to break it. You can make sure that all the stuff we said is a reality. And with that, Craig, I'll give you one more time to sound off, and then I think we're done, sir.
Hey, we are looking forward to trying to earn in, all of your business out there, and yeah, please, let's just keep talking. Love to show you more what we are able to do for you.
All right. And folks, if you don't have my contact information, reach out to Gail to get it. I love talking about this product. I'd love to take you guys deeper in the weeds or to look at a POC or all the above. So appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.